So this is primarily an unboxing video for a TP-Link Deco AX3000. Now, I've said primarily because I want to talk a little bit about mesh systems in general, and in particular the experience that has led me to actually get a modern mesh, because it might be of use for some people watching this video. I live in a quite old semi-detached house in Britain. The walls are thick and they are solid. They are not stud walls. So I have a certain degree of difficulty with Wi-Fi signals moving freely throughout this house, because Wi-Fi does not like solid things, especially when it's trying to go at high speed. So I'm talking about the sort of the 5G band tends to get heavily thumped by trying to go through solid objects like brick walls. And I knew this. So for a while now, what I had been doing was using an Ethernet connection between my downstairs and my upstairs. And downstairs I just had my old version media router, which has now been superseded by a Brsk router. And that would cover my living room obviously very happily, and most of downstairs actually pretty happily as well, and I'll come back to that. So upstairs though, I decided to try something that I thought was clever. And I had this little Asus router here, and as you can see it's only got 2 aerials to its name. It was pretty basic, but I got it because I needed some extra ports in my study. So I thought, well, I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone here, because this gives me extra ports and it gives me effectively a Wi-Fi extender. But I actually had the wired Ethernet going to upstairs in the back of this. And what I came to realise when I was putting the Brsk router in, because my overall speed with that was much faster than my virgin speed had been. And what I came to realise was that actually this has only got 100 megabits per second Ethernet. It hasn't got gigabit Ethernet. So this was actually a choke point on my system, because if anything got in range of this, it switched. I was using the same SSID, but this wasn't a mesh system. So what would happen was that my phone would pick up the SSID of this router when it got close, because it had the strongest signal, but it wasn't the fastest signal necessarily. That's the interesting thing. So what I found was that with this switched off, my phone would actually use the signal from the router downstairs, and it was faster still than the signal coming from this thing. So I thought, that was part of what my problem was, is that that was effectively capped to 100 megabits per second. And a word to the wise here, a megabit is less than a megabyte. You need 8 megabits to make a megabyte. So the whizzy speeds that they give you for your internet actually aren't perhaps as fast as you might think they are. Hadn't really appreciated that until recently. I'm just in that train of thought at the moment, so I just thought I'd mention that, because it means that the time it takes you to download a file is actually 8 times longer than you might think it is. Just try that out for yourself, but it does make a certain amount of sense when you realise that they're not measuring it in quite the same way. So, what then was my thinking? Well, I'm going to show you various speeds that I got around the house with my Brsk router that I've just got, because there's a bit of sort of muttering on the Brsk forums about the Brsk router not actually being great for the average house, but obviously it depends on what your definition of average is. But when I tested it, I found that I got full reach right to the back of the house from right at the front of the house. So actually, I mean, it wasn't as fast as it was right next to the router, but it never will be. But it did reach the entire house. So I thought, oh, I've just got myself a mesh system. Why have I done that? But I do have some justification for it, because, as I say, this old Asus router would have been much slower, and had things kept on picking that up, it would have reduced the Wi-Fi that was available, and it wasn't its signal was getting blocked in places just due to the sheer amount of brick between it and the reception point. So I think that the mesh system, which has 3 points to it, will give me a better overall coverage of the house, and I think that the speeds will be a bit faster because what's known as the backhaul with this system. So that's the wired or wireless connection that links the mesh nodes together. So you have 3 of these units, and they're all talking to each other all the time, is my understanding. And if they're talking to each other over a wired connection, that is going to be faster than them talking to each other over a wireless connection. So for me, my ground floor router will be replaced by a mesh node which acts as a router. That router will be backhauled with an Ethernet cable to upstairs. So upstairs will be as fast as downstairs is. So both of those mesh nodes will have full whack speed from the signal coming in from Brsk. Great. The third unit, I could go upstairs, I could go downstairs. It probably won't matter, I'll probably get really good coverage anyway, but it will be another boost for the back of the house, which gets the weakest signal at the moment from having having a router in the front. But if I have 2 routers in the front and 1 in the back, I think it will be a really good solid spread throughout the house. So I'm going to show you, I will unbox this on a different angle shortly, but just to show you the box, there is a very similar one to this that is available from Amazon as an Amazon exclusive. I can't tell what the difference is, apart from the fact that this is an X50 and that one is an X55. But they also have this this AX3000 designator on the front as well. So it's not the cheapest. The reason I've got this rather than the slightly cheaper version is because it has 3 ports on the back. 3 gigabit ports. That means I have 1 port for my backhaul connections and my internet connection in, which leaves me with 2 spare ports. Which means that I need a spare port in my upstairs study, and downstairs it means I could link, for example, my an Xbox and a TV to the wired connection. So that is a nice to have. Not many of these systems have that many ports on the back of them. So this is why I got this, because your typical router will probably have 4 ports spare and another port where you plug in your internet. So the router actually has an advantage over these, but this is as near as this is the best one I could find at my sort of price range for having that many ports available, in addition to actually doing the mesh stuff and the Wi-Fi stuff at the same time as well. So I know that a lot of people are replacing their Brsk routers. Now, I have to say, I've had maybe 1 or 2 glitches with it, but I've only had it a week, so that's not a terribly objective sort of view of it. It might well have done me alright. I think now that I've got rid of the old Asus router that was a bottleneck, I might have done alright with it. But as I say, I wanted to get one SSID across one network name across the whole house and just be done with it, basically. So I didn't have to worry about which router it was connecting to. So I think this is a better option, really, and this will also give me the backhaul and the wired ports that I wanted to keep my flexibility going. Whereas this one, its wired ports wouldn't actually have supported the maximum speeds that my network. So for reference, I'm taking 500 megabits per second connection from Brsk, which is absolutely fine. That's what it's giving me. But that router wouldn't have passed that through. So, this should be a far more resilient and a far more sort of future-proof version. You can, as with anything else tech-wise, you can spend whatever you want on one of these systems. But I think this for me makes the most sense right now. And I had a voucher that I was able to use. Ironically, I got this from Argos of all places. I couldn't actually find it in stock in PC World, so I got it from Argos just because they could get it to me that little bit faster. So what this says on the back is basically says Wi-Fi dead zone killer, It's Wi-Fi 6, which is a pretty sort of modern Wi-Fi standard. It reckons unrivaled Wi-Fi 6 speeds up to 3,000 megabits per second, but bear in mind, my connection is nowhere near that fast. Most people's probably won't be at this point in time. Wi-Fi dead zone killer, seamless roaming with one Wi-Fi name. You know, so this is a proper mesh system, not the sort of Heath Robinson mesh-ish system I was trying to use before. It's got TP-Link Home Shield as well. I have no idea what that means. I believe you just use an app, and an app will sort of set it all up. There's a quick a QR code on the back there. So this is 3 units. All of the units, is my understanding is, they're effectively exactly the same. So they all do the same job. They've all got the same sort of router nous that each other has. So it doesn't matter which one goes where. They'll all do the same thing. So as long as you're, this is another interesting point actually. I was going to say, as long as your broadband provider gives you an Ethernet connection, so a network cable connection, you can plug in straight into the back of one of these. Of course, Virgin Media doesn't do that because, as I've sent it back to them now, but their router plugs directly into their cable network with a sort of special connector. Most routers won't have that. So if your router doesn't have a cable modem style connector, then actually you won't be able to plug a Virgin Media cable straight into the back of these. You'd have to go from their router, probably acting just as a bridge, and then into the back of one of these. So you'd need an extra plug and an extra step before you could use a mesh system with them. So that's worth bearing in mind, perhaps, if you're in this country. I don't know what America tends to provide in that sense, direct to the door. Well, not direct to the door, but direct into the house. So your mileage might vary on that one. But at the moment, my Brsk router is a sort of rectangular box that sits flat, which is a bit of a pain because its footprint is quite large, but this footprint will be much smaller. So I'm hoping I can actually sit it close to where the signal comes in from Brsk, but in a sort of more obvious ways than my current Brsk, where my Brsk router is currently sat, so that it'll just be able to broadcast in the clear. Because obstructions, it doesn't really matter how good your Wi-Fi is. If you put it behind something, so as I've just discovered recently, if you put your TV panel in front of your router, expect reduced Wi-Fi, because it's going to struggle to get through the electronics and the signal your TV is putting out. So get it out from behind things, basically get it out in the open, and you'll probably be much happier. And the other thing I would say is, don't expect to get your full internet speed from your Wi-Fi. It's probably not going to happen. Even if you're point blank range, your radio signals are still bopping back and forth, and they've got to be sort of decoded and so on. So you'll probably get half your maximum download, I suspect, wirelessly as compared to doing it wired. So if you can go wired, go wired. That's the only way you're going to get your maximum speed. A lot of people seem to complain about this, saying that they're not getting their full speed. Well, you just won't on Wi-Fi, I'm afraid. So big chunky box. I'll switch to a different viewpoint, I think, and get into this. And then I will give you the results of my network speeds before and after. Because I've gone around the house at the moment just using the router, obviously with this disconnected. And I will find out whether or not it does actually make that much difference. I'm really hoping that at the back it will. But I've yet to try that out. But I will try that out for you, and then you can see whether or not this is of any use. Now, the bigger your home gets, obviously, the more chance there is you're going to need one of these. I suspect these may be overkill, but we will find out in a few moments. So let's have a look at what's actually inside this box. So as I've already mentioned, I got this from Argos. This has nothing to do with TP-Link, so I have no vested interest in whether or not I like this or not in that sense. I know there's an app, and I'm not going to look at the app on screen, I don't think, because I just know that there is one, and that's the sort of thing that will be of use apparently in actually setting up the network as a whole. And I've heard good things about it, so I've no reason to believe that this is going to be sort of in any way problematic. It's just a question of you know, how well it all links in practice as against the theory, I suppose. But I just thought you might be interested to see exactly what you get in the box, or whether or not you might need anything else. Because, for example, I don't know exactly how many network cables are actually included in here. It might be that I may well have enough anyway, because I'm already using a backhaul, so that may not be an issue for me as such, but it might be an issue for others. So let's have a look what we've got in here. And it was a good start if you can open the box in the right way. It's this way up, it would seem. As I say, there's another one of these on Amazon which seems to be very, very similar. I honestly couldn't tell you why Amazon are declaring that they've got an exclusive when this X50 is essentially the same as the X55. I'm really hoping that this works, because I've just torn the box ever so slightly there. Alright, let's have a look. That's very neat and orderly. So we have 1, 2, 3 decos. I assume the unit name is Deco. This is kind of what I was hoping for, because as you can see, these are not huge. They are quite discreet, and you know, will look like very similar to any other sort of home assistant type units you might have lying around the place. So that's all good. And there are indeed 3, as I would expect. So, hi there, welcome to the world of Deco, superior mesh Wi-Fi everywhere. Light status, yellow startup, blue setting up, green all is well, red has an issue. Okay, fair enough. So step 1 is download the Deco app, which is what I thought. Step 2, turn off your modem and presumably unplug it. Step 3, plug in the modem and a Deco. Step 4, open the app to finish setup. That's interesting. Now, I don't think you're necessarily going to need that. Directly plug into the Ethernet outlet if you don't have a modem. Yeah, so I don't think you'd need the modem. That's my understanding. I don't think you'd need the modem. I mean, you might still want to use the modem if for some reason the modem is really, really good. But I think their modem's kind of old. I'm trying to think, why would you need a modem? Well, I suppose they're thinking there about that situation I was talking about with Virgin Media, actually. So if you need the Virgin box because it needs to take the cable signal and translate it into Ethernet, then you would need to plug into the modem, actually, thinking about it. So that's probably the system, what they're anticipating there. Now, it feels like, yes, that is a separate section. So that is all just padding for the units. So I think I can actually get rid of that now. That's what the main box was holding. And let me just have a quick look then at what else is in here, because this, I'm hoping, is probably going to be various useful bits and pieces which would actually allow you to link up the various units together. But I don't know how generous they're going to be with all this. So in there I have various little bits and pieces of random paper. So power, more power. So all 3 power, are they really... that's... quick installation guide. Okay, well let's have a... there's literally nothing else in there. So I'm not getting the impression that there are... well, hang on, before I make a sweeping statement, let's have a look at one of these little bags. Nope, that is literally just power. That's all there is in there. So all we're getting in the little bags is the power unit. So what is in here? The reason I was pausing before I opened this one is because I'm not sure what exactly they're giving us in here. It might be an Ethernet cable. And I hope it is, because I think from what they're assuming is that you're going to use this wirelessly. So you're going to have all of you're going to have the 3 units, one of which will be wired, probably with the cable that's in here, if I can ever get into the bag, and the other units perhaps talking to themselves wirelessly. So I think it's a very very slim network cable, but it probably is a network cable. I think that is incredibly slim. Now that's interesting, because in the sense that with Brsk, I've already got an Ethernet cable to go into the back of one of these. So this is actually going to be a spare cable for me. That is definitely that's definitely an Ethernet cable. So you get one Ethernet cable in the box, and that's it. So if you need a backhaul for another one, you're going to need another backhaul cable, but that's okay. I think they could have thrown another one in, given that they do anticipate people using another wired backhaul. So again, just a little sort of quick installation guide there, which I might need to read through. I might just wing it. I think apparently the app will sort of auto detect the signal that's the network as a whole once you've got them all plugged in. And it should be fairly intuitive. So with that in mind, I'm probably going to get on and just download the app and then just see if I can get things up and running. Then I can come back to you with what the speeds are. But as you can see here, that's the rather useful aspect of these units, is that they have 3 gigabit ports here at the back, and that's for their power. But this gives you a lot of flexibility. It also means that when you've got these set up wirelessly, if you want to link something to this with an Ethernet cable, you can use this as a wired connection, albeit its backhaul will be wireless. So what I mean is, if you want to connect your laptop into this and get full speed, so you're not putting it on a Wi-Fi link to a Wi-Fi link, so to speak, you can just connect your laptop or anything else directly into the back of these with these wired connections. So that will eliminate any further drop-off that you might get from using Wi-Fi, which is a nice to have. So there is a lot to be said for having these around the house potentially, if your household are heavy users of things that need solid internet connections. So it's worth bearing that in mind, as mention that as an aside. And having a good, if they can pick up Wi-Fi speed well from another unit, then I can see that you could get a decent connection. You could then presumably connect another switch to one of these and in effect generate more more wired ports for yourself if you need that as well. So switches are not expensive. I imagine that would work as a concept, but I'm not a network engineer, disclaimer. So I'm going to go and set these up, and I will report back on how that goes. Cheers for now. Considering the app was supposed to smoothly take me through the setup process, I am traumatized by that. Now, I have got them set up, but a word to the wise, the app and the written instructions, such as they weren't, don't really explain to you exactly what is and is not a good idea. They called your existing router a modem, and I think I know why, and I think the reason is they're sort of expecting you to kind of know what to do before you start doing this. So initially I tried plugging it straight into the incoming signal. That didn't work. I should have realised that the router that your ISP gives you is, it's a sort of a gateway. So I think you've got to, whatever signal comes in, it's got to go in there first. So I thought, fine. Plugged that into the back of one of the decos. That eventually woke up, but when I then came to try and give it my existing SSID, my existing network name, it just sort of said, nah, don't want to, don't like that name. And we had this sort of battle, and then I realised that, of course, the router was still putting out the same SSID as it had been before I plugged the deco into it. So actually the missing step in the instructions was to turn the router's Wi-Fi signal off. So you turn that off and you free up the channel, the network name, for the decos to take over. So you've got to sort of use your nous and kind of put that extra step in there to turn effectively your Wi-Fi router into just a modem, which is just doing a wired signal. That's the point that their instructions seem to miss, to my mind, unless I missed something, always possible. So once I'd done that, I then had to remember that you have to connect the I had to connect the deco downstairs with the deco upstairs, deco to deco. So what that meant for me was that I'd connected the upstairs link back into the router, thinking that the router was going to handle that. The ISP router, the Brsk router, was going to handle that. It didn't. It had to be a wired connection between the two decos direct. So found that out the hard way. Eventually, after one firmware update later, I can't write it, can you? A firmware update later, the deco upstairs then recognised that it was in fact wired into the deco downstairs, and that then seemed to give me full whack upstairs and downstairs. That was a lot more traumatic than it had to be, had the app actually been slightly more worth its salt. And then it argued with me when I then later tried to change its SSID back to my normal SSID. Because of that clash that I told you about earlier, it seemed to be very stubborn doing it. Now, I don't know if there's some sort of quiet timeout that goes on so you can't keep flicking between them. I don't know. Something was going on there, but eventually I was able to save the new SSID, and that allowed me to have the network as intended. Now, the outcome of all of that was pretty much what I expected, in so much as nothing much changed in the living room, because that is where the first deco was placed, and if anything it was fractionally slower, but not by much, probably just because it's got an extra layer of overhead that the original router wouldn't have. Towards the back of the house, that improved vastly. So in the kitchen I was barely getting any signal at all, and I'm going to be throwing up these the actual sort of speed tests on Google just as I go. It's not very scientific because I've only done it once in one spot, and my phone is a variable there, but it does seem to register, how fast things are going, so it should be okay. And in the back of this room as well, it was a much improved signal strength. But the signal strength in the kitchen blew me away because it was so much faster. I think maybe because it's got a more sort of direct line of sight, or possibly it was getting the benefit of the mesh system to actually sort of combine two signals. It's possible. But that was vastly improved. And the one time perhaps when the single router just couldn't match that for distance, for power. So that was a really good outcome. So going upstairs, the study was faster. Again, I think because it was just a direct shot. Interestingly, right up close against the router, it seems oddly slow. So maybe you have to be a certain distance from it for it to really start kicking in. And then my son's bedroom was, my bedroom was about the same because it's directly above the router downstairs, so that didn't really surprise me. Then my son's bedroom was again significantly improved because there's a deco unit directly underneath it now, so that will broadcast straight up and avoid a problem I was having before with solid walls. So that worked well as intended. Up in the attic space, it's not somewhere that's actually got any Wi-Fi going to it at all. Nothing's using the Wi-Fi up there. It was broadly the similar actually. I think because going up through floors was probably easier than going across through walls. So in that sense, there wasn't a massive amount of difference, but I noticed did very much depend on where I stood in the room. So in some places it was much faster, in some places it was about the same. So as I say, not overly scientific. A lot would depend on your overall house size, house build, you know, exactly what it's. Obviously, stud walls, Wi-Fi won't really care about so much, but my walls are incredibly solid. So, you know, it is an issue, but I can now happily say that I do have very good coverage in all four corners of the house. The app is a bit of an issue in the sense that it seems to be the only way to configure the network. So if that app does not do what you need it to do, that could be problematic. That's when you might want to start looking around at different producers of systems, you know. I was recommended a system called Unify, which I think requires a little bit more technical knowledge, but would you know, is a sort of a very standard and that sort of thing that gets put into new builds and so on these days apparently. But as a sort of a, you know, an off-the-shelf product goes, yeah, it's been a little bit more difficult to get it set up than I anticipated it being. So I hope that what I've just mentioned helps, because it is logical when you sit down, but you're not getting a big stonking manual. You know, I'd have to have a magnifying glass to read anything in the manual, and I think it's the same thing in multiple different languages. I'm not even convinced it took me to the right web page initially. I think it took me to another link for a TP app download for some reason. That might have been just me again, but you know, it's just very dependent on you being able to wrangle your sort of network names and everything else, and you will need probably at least another network cable if you're going to do any sort of wired backhaul and so on, because only one in the box. So another thing I hadn't really thought through was the fact that backhaul had to go from one deco unit into the other deco unit, because that meant I used up 2 ports on my main deco unit, because one port had to take the signal from the ISP. So actually I only have 1 port spare on that, despite having 3 ports in total on the unit. Which is okay, because it still means I've got a port free and I could put a switch on that if I wanted to give myself more ports locally. But again, it was one of those things where I thought, I didn't really think that through properly, because I think I'd thought maybe I just hadn't quite done it end to end enough. But in any event, it works. It definitely works. But I managed to lose my original router. So my original router is still there, just being a wired router. So in a sense, it's not a switch. It's still routing in a limited way, but the actual Wi-Fi routing has been done by the mesh system. So yeah, it's been an interesting one. Took a lot longer than I expected it to, because it all comes down to the app at the end of the day. You know, it's relying on the app to do the thinking, and I'm sure the app's going to be very useful now it's set up. But I think the way in which it was describing things, maybe I was making assumptions and I was sort of over-reading things, but basically where it says modem, it means your existing internet box. So your Wi-Fi, your router box, but not what I would call a modem these days. So you're going to have to keep that, it seems, and just plug that into your first deco unit and then go from there. And you know, that's helpful in a sense, because now that I think about it, it also means I've still got the spare ports on the original router left as wired ports. So ironically, whilst I got them with a view to having spare wired ports, I've still got my original router in the mix, so it doesn't really matter. So it's worked out all right for me. It does mean that perhaps, you know, you could get a slightly cheaper solution than this one, but you know, the speeds do seem very, very good. So I'll just have to see how it works out over time at the end of the day, you know, and hopefully it'll future-proof me a little bit, having spent that much on it. But yeah, I'll leave a link in the comments, well, in the description rather, just to see, you know, if you want to try and assist the channel, you can always have a look at buying one from Amazon, or you know, getting the X55 version of it, which should be essentially the same thing as far as I can see. But let me know in the comments if you've had any of these sort of difficulties, if you know of any tweaks that might help with the deco system of this particular flavour. And thanks for watching. Cheers for now.